class, I'll teach you to spot patterns that shape every relationship you have. So the basic premise behind attachment, and that was the brilliance of John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, is that it was his idea that attachment is a basic need, just like food and water. It's the basic mechanism to make sure that we feel safe and protected. If we don't feel that immediate connection or that attachment tug between us, we will feel a grave danger. It's basically about survival. If you're not paying attention to me, I'm not going to be safe. When I heard that, everything clicked into place for me. At the time, I was actually going through a breakup. I was in pain and I was suffering and I was searching for answers. And there they were, all these answers. And that's when I reached out to my childhood friend, Rachel. And when we were looking at the data and we were looking about all this information, it was all buried in scientific literature. None of it was translated or approachable to people. So when Rachel and I wrote Attached, basically we had to excavate all of that information and make it something that people can use in their everyday life. Attached sold over 3 million copies worldwide. It was translated to more than 42 languages. And my second book is Secure, and I hope it will be just as helpful, if not more, than Attached. One of the reasons that Attached resonated so much with so many people is because of the case studies and the pop culture references in the book, and we're going to include that also in this class. These stories and case studies are composites. They were taken from common patterns and experiences of various people that I know. I changed the names and details to protect people's privacy, but what's important is that the concepts and lessons are true. So this will really help you navigate the whole relationship landscape much better. In this class, we're going to go over the 4 attachment styles: anxious, avoidant, fearful avoidant, and secure. We all have one of these attachment styles, and what the original study found is that 54% were secure, around 25% were avoidant, and about 20% were anxious, and a very small amount were fearful avoidance. And that's good news, actually, because it means that the majority of us are secure. One of the most prevalent misconceptions is that the attachment styles that we have in childhood is the attachment styles that we're going to end up having as adults. But actually, the research shows that that simply is not true. And I find this incredibly hopeful because it means that we can and we do change our attachment styles across the lifespan. It's not a sickness that you need to heal. It's not a personality disorder. It's a set of patterns that you can learn to change. And so it really made me change how I do therapy. While I still encourage people to share some of their childhood experiences, I stopped looking for the cause and effect. Instead, I really drew on the idea of how the brain changes in the here and now to create the tools to help people become more secure. And we'll see there are certain advantages to having each attachment style. And each attachment style comes with its own superpowers. And it's more learning how to lean into your biology and work with your biology rather than trying to heal yourself. And that's a very important distinction in attachment science. So that's what I want to focus this class on. One of the things that I really love about this science is how teachable it is. And one of the things I worked really hard at is to create simple tools, because attachment is simple. It's a simple neurocircuitry. I'll teach you 2 practical frameworks that I call CARP and CMEs, tools that help calm the nervous system, build trust, and create relationships that feel safe. These tools give you the ability to navigate relationships no matter what stage of a relationship you're in. So if you're single, it will certainly help you date better. And then if you're already in a relationship, that can also be a game changer, because all of a sudden you understand the reasons why you and your partner might have different views on the same scenario. Initially, I had the idea that love conquers all. And now I still have a certain idea, but I modified it. And I can say that I think that secure love can conquer all. In this class, you will learn to identify your attachment style, understand how it's shaping your relationships right now, learn what secure love should look and feel like, and ultimately develop the skills to create more secure relationships. And if we can learn to become more secure, we can really improve our lives in an astonishing way, and not just our relationship, also our inner lives. I'm Dr. Amir Levine, and this is MasterClass. Before we get into all the specific tools and how to improve your relationships, I really want you to understand what attachment is all about. So I mentioned John Bowlby, who introduced the idea that attachment is a basic need to feel safe. But then came Mary Ainsworth, who was one of Bowlby's students, and she was an experimental psychologist who discovered specific attachment styles through the strange situation test. It's really the basis of attachment science, and the best way to understand it is by showing you a video. And the way that the strange situation test works is that you bring a mother and a child to a room full of toys and you watch them through a one-way mirror. They get into the room and the child gets all excited about all the toys. It starts pointing at the toys, wanting to play with the toys, and they let the child play with the toys for a while. And then they ask for the mother or the caregiver to leave the room. And immediately the child drops everything they were playing with. They run to the door, starts banging on the door and crying, and really oftentimes inconsolable. Then they ask the caregiver to go back into the room. And it's in that moment, the reunion, that Mary Ainsworth identified those three attachment styles: the anxious, avoidant, and secure. And it all had to do with how effective was the mother or the caregiver-child bond in regulating the child emotions and how effective it was in helping the child calm down. So you can see the different reactions in the video. The child with the secure attachment, the minute the child is picked up and held, they calm down right away and they start pointing at toys again, wanting to play again. The child with the anxious attachment, it takes them a really long time to be consoled. Sometimes they calm down and then all of a sudden we remember the horrible thing that just happened to them and start crying again. And the avoidant child, sometimes they're not even going to cry or even protest. And sometimes they stay limp in their mother's arms. But when they looked and tested, they saw that their blood pressure goes through the roof. And their nervous system is reacting quite strongly because they don't know how to use the bond to help themselves calm down. So I think the most important message here is that as a social species, one of the most powerful ways of regulating our emotions is through other people, especially if we're securely attached to them. So these were the three attachment styles in the strange situation test. Then later on, Mary Main came up with the fourth attachment style. This was all in children. And then in 1987, Hazen and Shaver published a seminal paper that indeed showed that these anxious, avoidant, and secure attachment styles are also valid and exist in adulthood, and they really guide and determine the quality of our adult relationships as well. And that really started this whole new field of adult attachment. And remember, just because you were parented a certain way doesn't mean that you're doomed to a certain type of adult relationship. One of the most important things to really understand about attachment is that it's pre-language. It forms way before we even know how to speak. And that's really crucial to understand because oftentimes we try to make relationships better through speech. And that's fair and it's valid and it can be helpful. But it's also important to remember sometimes a hug or a kiss or some sort of physical gesture can go a really long way when it comes to attachment. And also we can see it in our pets because our pets don't speak, but we get hugely attached to them. And there's a whole language of back and forth that we form with our pets that's hugely, hugely meaningful. And I think we've all had that experience when something bad happened to us. And we even have an attachment hierarchy in our brain of who is the first person we're going to go to. And if we're securely attached to that first person that we're going to go to, sometimes a single word or even just a hug will immediately make us feel better. And that's what I call a secure bond. There's no Xanax or Klonopin in this world that can be as effective as a secure bond. But on the other hand, insecure attachments are also one of the most potent instigators of emotional turmoil. So if you think about it, attachment is really at the basis of both suffering and healing from suffering. And secure attachment is a very powerful way of regulating our emotions and helping us feel better. So I want to give you some tools to make attachment a source of healing rather than pain. When people fight, they often think about who's right and who's wrong, and they try to argue their point. But that's really wrong from an attachment perspective, because attachment doesn't care who's right and who's wrong. Attachment cares about, I need to feel safe. And now that we're fighting, we're disconnected. So I've devised 2 rules to help people get over that who's right and who's wrong, and get straight into the attachment solution of how to feel safe again in the couplehood. So the first one is that only one person is allowed to be upset at a time. And the responsibility of the other person is to help calm them down. And oftentimes what happens when couples get into a fight, after they learn their rule, the one person will say, hey, sorry, you're going against the rules. I was upset first. You have to help me calm down. And they start laughing about it most of the time. And it kind of like dispels some of the tension. And if that fails, then I have a second rule, which I also call the mea culpa rule, which is, it's my fault. So if both parties are upset now, then both have failed the basic tenet of the relationship, which is to keep each other calm. And remember, attachment is not about trying to reason yourself through a fight, because attachment is pre-verbal. Attachment lies much further down in the brain about how we feel safe. So these 2 rules are deceptively simple, and they take some practice. But if you follow them, they will help you become more securely attached to your partner, because secure attachment can't build if your nervous system is overwhelmed with conflict. Because attachment is how we feel safe in the world, we've all developed what I like to call attachment homeostasis, where our brain has a baseline of all of our relationships, and it keeps track of all the important people in our lives. And if there's a disruption in that baseline, immediately the feeling of danger will kick in, and we'll have to try to reestablish the connection with that person. So attachment homeostasis is a system you create with your partner that is constantly working to create balance, safety, and connection. I want to read you a quote from the book Margot's Got Money Troubles by Rupi Thorpe. So she writes, and I knew something bad had happened, that his feeling had shifted. Normally, there was a cord of attachment between us that I could tug and feel him there on the other hand. I suddenly had the horrifying sensation that it had been snipped off. And now I had a cord that led nowhere, that was just dangling in space. And I really love this quote because it really exemplifies that attachment homeostasis and that link that we feel to other people and what happens when it gets ruptured. Once we can achieve greater attachment homeostasis in our life, then we become more secure rather than having to worry about the potential danger. And that's part of what we call the dependency paradox. The dependency paradox is one of my favorite concepts from Attached. Basically, what it means is that in order to become truly independent, we have to find the right people to depend on. And really, the right people to depend on are secure people. So let me explain. Remember, if we go back to the strange situation test, when I described the child and the caregiver walking into a room full of toys, and the child immediately starting to point on everything, wanting to play with everything, that moment shows a very important principle in attachment logic, and that attachment and how secure we feel is inextricably linked to our exploratory drive. When you get your attachment homeostasis, then your exploratory drive goes into action. You become more curious, more creative. You look at the world, try to explore the world, see what you want to do, just like the child in the strange situation test, starting to play and explore and be curious. One of the things that we now know is that the brain is basically an energy guzzler. It uses up 20% of our body's energy, while it only consists of 2% of our body's weight. The problem is, if we're trying to work harder, we're trying to think harder, we have more difficult tasks, our brain can't really increase the energy flow. The only thing that a brain can do is that it can sway a certain amount of energy from one area to the other. And the whole idea is that if we feel safe and we have that secure base, we can spend less energy on vigilance and monitoring the environment, and more energy basically can be diverted to the prefrontal cortex, where we think abstractly, we create. There have actually been several studies that prove this concept. For example, one study, they asked people to rate the slope of a mountain. If they were alone, if they were just next to someone they don't know, or if they were next to a trusted person. And they actually rated the slope of the mountain as less steep if we were to climb the mountain with a trusted person. So our brain even thinks about physical tasks as less demanding if we're actually doing it with someone that we trust. So if you want to achieve a daunting task, something that you've been wanting to do for a long time and you've been procrastinating and finding it difficult to do, one of the best ways of making it less difficult is to find a trusted person to do it with. Have you ever gotten really upset when you weren't invited to a dinner party, or you saw on social media that you were excluded from an event? And then maybe you told yourself, I shouldn't feel so bad. They don't owe me anything. They don't have to invite me to everything. Because I want to tell you about a set of experiments that actually show the harmful effect of social exclusion on the brain. So the one now classic experiment is called the cyberball experiment. And the way that the cyberball experiment works is that you are playing a simple two-dimensional video game where you play a game of catch with two other figures. And you throw the ball to each other, but at a certain point, all of a sudden, they stop throwing the ball in your direction. So the brain imaging data really showed us that areas that are related to pain, distress, and self-scrutiny come online in a very, very powerful way. What that means is when the ball is not thrown in your direction, oftentimes people start to think about what is wrong with me, why are they not inviting me? People reported feeling that life is less meaningful, that they're less in control of their life, and reduced self-esteem. So this is so ingrained in our brain, this exclusion, and it's almost like a reflex that we have in our brain. So the next time you're not invited to something, remember, if you're feeling upset, and especially if you feel bad about being upset, you shouldn't, because there's a science that shows that you're not just sensitive. Exclusion has a profound negative effect on our brain. So in romantic relationships, it shows up everywhere. We just have to look for it. And oftentimes people are not fully aware of it. It shows up when you bring a new pet to the home and all of a sudden one is favored over the other. It shows up when you have a new baby. And actually, there are ways of mitigating it. For example, let's say you have to go to a dinner party and you can't invite your partner, but you can still text and say, miss you, wish you were here, like everyone is asking about you. I can't wait to come home and be with you. There are all of these little ways of making you feel included, even if you can't make an event or if you are not going to an event. And also, it's important for you to know that you can still be excluded when there's only two people in a room. And that's been powerfully shown by the still face experiment. So the best way for me to explain to you about the still face experiment is by actually showing you a clip of the real experiment happening in real time. In the still face experiment, they bring a caregiver and an infant into a room, and they have them face each other, and they just behave as they would normally do. They smile at each other. They make this cute little baby babble back and forth, and it all goes really, really well. And then they ask the caregiver, the mother, to turn around and turn back and have a completely still face, have no facial expression at all. And immediately the baby picks up on it, tries to engage the mother and get her attention, but to no avail. The mother still doesn't respond. So as soon as these simple measures are not successful, they turn into more dire measures. And the baby starts to scream and yell and withdraw a little bit with their body. And then when that doesn't work, they start really crying. And that's actually a little bit heartbreaking when you see it in the clip. And then they ask the mother to re-engage again. And very, very quickly, that emotional rapport comes back. And the system goes back into that attachment homeostasis and everything calms down. And even though the still face experiment is between a baby and her mother, this shows up endless times in romantic relationships. And oftentimes because people don't really understand that still facing is a really aggressive act in a relationship. And they would just say, but what do you want from me? I didn't say anything. And the other person feels really bad because they don't know about the still face experiment. And they feel, why am I reacting like that? He's not saying anything. But in reality, from the point of view of the brain, it's an extremely aggressive act that really cuts at the core of how we feel safe in the world. It's really important for people to understand that ignoring someone and cutting off the emotional back and forth usually doesn't end well. An example of this in modern dating is ghosting. This phenomenon of ghosting to the attachment system is a threat signal. From the brain's perspective, it triggers a stress response. Areas of the brain that are associated with pain, distress, and self-scrutiny and preoccupation come online. And it really takes a strong grip on you, making it very hard for you to let go and move on. But a very important silver lining for anyone who's been ghosted is to think about that they've probably dodged a bullet, because secure people don't usually ghost. They're actually very good in communicating their wants and wishes in a way that actually is not that hurtful. And later in this class, we're going to get into how you can become more secure and seek out partners who are the same. One of the biggest myths that I often hear about relationships, and especially when relationships end, is that people feel that they need to go back and get closure. The drive for closure isn't really a need for closure. It's a trick that your attachment neurocircuitry is playing on you. So it's really a preoccupation with the relationship, but the brain convinces us, oh no, you have to go back there. You have to figure it out, wanting you to engage in the relationship. That's not you really wanting to understand better. That's your brain keeping the relationship alive. And I really love Taylor Swift's lyrics, I Forgot That You Existed, because that really shows you what happens when you stop thinking about the other person. And I think even in her lyrics, she says, all of a sudden, all of that didn't matter anymore. It's just like, I forgot that you existed. When you realize that the need for closure is just a reaction in your brain, it's much easier to let go. I have this new trick, and I call it talk to your habenula. So there are two parts of the brain. One is related to that preoccupation, and it's called the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis. And that's a little area of the brain that keeps us thinking and thinking and thinking and worrying. But then there's a countermeasure in the brain, which is called the habenula, which is basically an area of the brain that comes online when you realize that things aren't working anymore. And it cuts off the dopamine investment in the whatever it is that you've been invested in. And all of a sudden, it doesn't seem that interesting or important anymore. So the way to talk to your habenula is to say, this wasn't working. And it's nobody's fault. Or you can use attachment language and you say they were avoidant or anxious and they were not the right for me. And it's not my fault or their fault. It just isn't working. So that's one way to talk to your habenula. Another way is to increase interest in someone else. or increase interests in your friends and your family, like to find a distraction. And then you get to the point where I forgot that you existed. So now that we understand how exclusion and unresponsiveness activate the attachment system, the next question becomes clear. How do we find that secure base? How do we convince the brain that the environment is safe? I started searching for tools that people can use immediately in their everyday life. And what I came up with is creating that antidote to that cyberball effect and that still facing, that feeling of disconnect. Because what we know about the brain is that if you create a feeling of hyper-connectedness, the brain loves that actually. When people are hyper-included, they feel they have more control over their life, it increases their self-esteem, and it makes them feel that life is more meaningful. So that's like such a great effect just from being hyper-included. So like, how do you create that? It really is on those small interactions of feeling that the other person is available. Remember, it's about safety, and it's about knowing that the other people are there for you. And once you know that they're there, you're not going to really put a lot of emphasis or effort into that. That actually gives you time to explore. So I had to come up with something simple that we can all do and that we can establish that availability that can help us feel hyper-included and others too. And that's when I came up with these 5 pillars of a secure life, which I called CARP, which stands for consistent, available, responsive, reliable, and predictable. Consistent means that whatever level of involvement you've had, you have to keep it stable. Available means that you have to make an internal decision that if someone is going to reach out to you that you're attached to, that you're going to respond to. And then if you make that internal decision, then responsive becomes easy because once they reach out to you, you know that you have this commitment to respond to them and make sure to keep that attachment back and forth going. And then it's not enough that you feel, oh yeah, I'm so great, I'm consistent, available, and responsive. You have to reach out and make sure that the other person experiences you as such. So the way that you do that, you really want to make sure that the other person experiences you as reliable, meaning they know that they'll reach out to you and that you'll be there for them, and predictable, which means that you can't all of a sudden disappear or ghost them. Put simply, these are the attributes that make you feel secure in a relationship. In our society today, we have a misrepresentation of our emotional needs. We've come to believe that one single person should meet all of our emotional needs. They should be a good spouse, a good parent, a good friend, everything all wrapped in one. And that's simply not realistic from the point of view of our brain. Part of what I try to help people with in my private practice is to create their secure village and to find other people to channel some of your social needs to, so you don't put all of your eggs in one basket and then get disappointed. And I find that it's a really, really important and very, very effective tool to help people become more secure and meet people's social and emotional needs. When you are CARP with someone and others are CARP with you, you've created this hyper-connected bubble for yourself. It's really a place where you feel that constant attachment link with others, that it's there and that it's safe. And that's enormously helpful, not just for our relationships and feeling good about relationships and all the psychological benefits that we talked about, but also for our health, for our bodily health. And so studies show that when we feel that connectedness, then it improves our cognition, it improves our immunology, we have a stronger immune system. And other studies show that it actually decreases inflammation. So I think what happens is that you get all these benefits from the reduced stress in your life that then show up in all these really amazing health advantages. First, let me give you some examples of what not being CARP look like. And we've all been the recipients of those behaviors. When we text or call or email and the people don't call us back and we start to get flustered about it. But also making plans, but being non-committal about it. And then we're like, oh, so are we going to meet? Are we not going to meet? Do you still want to go on Saturday night? And it's really frustrating, and it turns on your brain's distress signal. Think about CARP as a way to really pacify that danger radar attachment neurocircuitry in your brain. It's almost like the off switch of the attachment alarm systems. So we devised CARP to help take care of the attachment neurocircuitry, to pacify the attachment neurocircuitry. But then how do you create this long-lasting change in the brain that will ensure longer, more sustained, secure mode? And that's where I came up with this concept of SIMIs, which stands for the seemingly insignificant minor interactions of everyday life. If you understand the brain from a neuroscience perspective, you really understand that those little interactions that we have on a daily basis, like saying hello to someone in the elevator, the way you talk to your barista, all these small interactions, each and every one of them gives you an opportunity for real change in the brain. That's why CARP SIMIs are so powerful. They accumulate in the nervous system as evidence of closeness, steadiness, stability, and care. There's so many ways that you can integrate CARP SIMIs into your relationship. Oftentimes, just a simple good morning text or miss you or thinking about you. Another thing that I love is saying thank you, even for little things that people do. So for example, if your partner is making the bed, so you can thank them, thank you for making the bed. Sort of these little acknowledgements go a long way. Even right now, as you're watching this class on MasterClass, take a moment to text your date or to text your partner. Or if they're sitting next to you, hold their hand. That's an example of a CARP SIMI in action. I think it's important for me to stress that CARP is a long-term commitment, that like one big grand gesture of love, that's not going to cut it. It's really the long, ongoing, sustained, basically safety. You're giving the person a newly found feeling of safety. That's what their brain really needs in order to change and become more secure. I use CARP and SIMIs in my daily life all the time now. So it's hard for me not to text someone back or to email someone right back because I know now what it means to their brain if I don't do that. Even today, when my partner texted me asking, how's the shoot going for MasterClass? And we barely had any time to reply, I made sure to take a few minutes to reply to him. I even sent him a picture from the set so he'll also feel part of the experience, but also that I'll maintain those CARP SIMIs between us. One way to think about how to implement CARP SIMIs in your life is to think about exercise. It's that repeated, ongoing, consistent investment that really bears the most fruit. Now, we're ready to dive more deeply into each of the 4 attachment styles, their superpowers, their struggles, and how they experience CARP and SIMIs. So, as I mentioned before, there are 4 main styles: anxious, avoidant, fearful avoidant, and secure. To break down these 4 attachment styles, let me give you some examples. Let's say you're trying to reach your partner and they're not calling you back. What do? If you find yourself really exasperated, calling them many times, calling other friends to see what's happening with them and where they are, that usually means that you have an anxious attachment style. But if you don't notice it entirely and they come home and you don't even mention anything, that usually means that you have more of an avoidant attachment style. Let's say you call them once or twice, they're not there, and when they come home, you're like, what happened? Are you okay? Everything's fine? That's more like a secure attachment style. And then the 4th attachment style is a combination of anxious and avoidant, fearful avoidant. They want closeness, but they're afraid that others will hurt them. So they're very cautious about getting into relationships. Knowing about attachment styles shows you that other people may see relationships as very differently from you, sometimes diametrically opposed to the way that you see it, and understanding that they're coming from a completely different place and learning the capacity to put yourself in their shoes and respond to them from where they're coming from, that's relationship changing right there and then. So I want to show you a clip from the movie 500 Days of Summer, and I want to see if you can identify some of these attachment styles in it.
So you have a boyfriend?
No,
Why not?
because I don't want one.
Come on, I don't believe that.
You don't believe that a woman could enjoy being free and independent?
Are you a lesbian?
No, I'm not a lesbian. I just don't feel comfortable being anyone's girlfriend. I like being on my own. Relationships are messy and people's feelings get hurt. Who needs it?
Shit, you're a dude. She's a dude.
Okay, but wait. What happens if you fall in love? What?
Well, you don't believe that, do you?
It's love, it's not Santa Claus.
There's no such thing as love, it's fantasy.
Well, I think you're wrong. I think you know when you feel it.
There's so much in this clip from an attachment perspective that I think is really important, so I'm going to break it down to you one by one. First, what you can really tell is that none of them know about attachment styles or about attachment theory, because it's almost like the blind is leading the blind. You can clearly see that Summer is giving you the world belief of someone who's an avoidant. But the other two, not knowing about avoidant attachment style, think more along the lines of other myths and beliefs that we have in our society, that men are more emotionally unavailable and don't want relationships. So he tells her, oh, so you're like a dude. She said, no, I'm not a dude. I just don't really want to be in a relationship. And he doesn't really know what to do with it because he doesn't know about avoidant attachment style. And then the final point is that there's this idea that if she only found the truth, then she'll believe in love. Again, that idea that love will conquer all, that if you only understood what love is, then you'll feel comfortable to be open and loving. And again, that's not something that coincides with the scientific findings, because the scientific findings show that 25% of the population will not feel comfortable with a lot of love and closeness, because 25% of the population are avoidant. So knowing attachment and knowing about these attachment styles give you such a different way of looking at this one scenario. You all of a sudden can see it with your eyes open and understand exactly the dynamics that happen there. Once you start recognizing these patterns, the behaviors that used to confuse you suddenly make perfect sense. Let's talk about anxious attachment. My personal take is that people with anxious attachment have like this perceptual superpowers, that they can notice things that other people can't notice. And oftentimes they notice subtle danger or sudden difficulty in relationships, but they can also notice a whole other myriad of things that actually can be really helpful for them in everyday life. Whether you're a parent or a day trader on Wall Street, you notice things that other people don't notice that can really give you an advantage. But it can also be very challenging in relationships because you just see things that others don't see. You have that extra layer of sensitivity. If someone with an anxious attachment spots a disconnect in their relationship, it triggers a stress response, like a danger response. So the nervous system is firing, something is wrong, something is wrong. You get the autonomic nervous system involved, you get the amygdala, a lot of preoccupation and thinking, as well as just stress response in the whole body. We'll all have that basic safety mechanism radar there. It's just that people with an anxious attachment, it gets triggered more easily. You can't help that. That's your biology. It doesn't mean that you're too sensitive. It means that you have a certain sensitivity that you need to learn to live with. And so this whole class is about finding ways to live with your biology rather than trying to go against it. So the whole idea is how to help people with anxious attachment not trigger their stress response that quickly. When that danger switch is flipped on, something very specific happens from the point of view of attachment. People engage in activity strategies and protest behavior. Activating strategies are different thoughts and feelings that we have that keep us preoccupied with a relationship. And protest behavior is the things that we do, the behavior that we do to reestablish the availability of the other person. If we can't establish that availability, we will escalate it. So if someone is not calling us back, initially we're going to say, hey, how's it going? But then eventually we'll start calling them a lot, calling again and again, even though it goes straight to voicemail, or even leaving everything, driving over to their work to see if they're okay. Sometimes protest behavior can seem really crazy to people, that they're finding themselves forced to act in a way that doesn't feel organic to them, but it's a very, very powerful, very, very basic system that is sometimes stronger than us, but really pushes us to try to make sure that the other person is available. But the thing is, the protest behavior can be very, very small, and then it works if the other person responds right away. It doesn't work when people don't really respond and then things escalate. I want to show you an example of an attachment-related behavior, and I want to see if you can identify it, and I'll tell you what it is after we see the clip.
I can't believe I got left. Left!
So Pam got left. Her husband, Bo, took off with half their stuff when she was out rounding up Day's piglets after a twister. I'm not kidding.
I insisted she stay with us so I could help build up her confidence again. Pam's self-worth has always been tied to the attention of men.
Which, maybe isn't the best thing for Lily to witness.
What are you talking about?
Nothing.
It could be him. That could be him, you guys. It could be him. Get. That could be him. It could be him. It's not him.
So what do you think we saw here? We clearly saw a form of protest behavior and how insane it can be and how it can drive people to behave in ways that seem really crazy to others and to oneself. But at the same time, we can also see, again, when people don't know about attachment, how they can misconstrue certain behaviors and give it a completely different and wrong meaning, because in their mind, it's that her self-esteem is affected by the attention of men. Her behavior has nothing to do with her self-esteem. And I find in my practice and in my work, many people that are highly successful and very well put together engage in really the craziest protest behavior because it's such a basic force inside us. It's a survival mechanism. It's like, I need this other person to be available to me, and I'm going to be very distressed until that happens. The beauty of it is, once that other person is available to us, it really calms down the system very, very quickly. All it takes is just like a little responsiveness to make it all go away. So CARP and CMEs are the major building blocks for people with anxious attachment style to create their secure life. What they need to do is that they need to be CARP. That's first and foremost. But the more important thing, they need to make sure that other people are CARP with them. So that's why I came up with this whole idea of like the CARP intervention. If you're anxious, you need to use the CARP intervention and maybe say to people, hey, listen, I have learned about this new thing about being CARP, and that's really important to me. I want to be this way with others, but it's very important to me that other people are CARP also with me. And you explain to them what CARP is, and then you wait to see what happens. But then the idea is that if they can't and they continue with all these non-CARP behaviors that really activate you, then you have to deprioritize them. We always have these CARP people in our lives that we don't pay attention to because they're boring, they're solid, there's no drama there. But all it takes is this switch to switch your attention now to those people who are CARP. Instead of like, why aren't you texting me? Are you there? Hello, hello. It's like, no, I'm not going to text this person. I'm going to shift my attention and I'm going to text a CARP person instead. And that little shift can really start a huge process of secure transformation. And specifically when it comes to dating, you want to do those CARP interventions. The earlier, the better, And that goes into a lot of the different myths around dating. It's like, we don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to do anything that can potentially jeopardize the relationship. No, you do want to rock the boat. You do want to see from really early on whether this is right for you or not. There's so much at stake. And why waste all this time when you can actually decipher pretty quickly, okay, this person, they get scared of me being so intense. And I might as well look for someone else who's not going to be scared of it. So let's talk about the avoidant attachment style. People who have an avoidant attachment style oftentimes really value their independence. They think of themselves as self-reliant. They don't really need a lot of input from their surrounding to thrive. So they have this biological preference for more distance. The problem starts when things start to get too close. That's where they start to feel uncomfortable. And that's where they have to learn how to manage their biology better in order to allow themselves to feel more secure. How do people with an avoidant attachment style manage closeness? So they have a trick up their sleeves, which are called deactivating strategies. So it's any thoughts or ideas or behaviors that will create distance in a relationship. So it can be anything from noticing small little imperfections in your partner, from walking ahead of them, when your partner is sick, having a hard time taking care of them because that's a huge opportunity to get closer, having a wandering eye, being a workaholic, working late, all these different techniques that make sure that there's more distance in a relationship. There's like so many of them. But it's important to emphasize that deactivating strategies are not meant to be cruel. They're not out to get you. They're just doing things to protect themselves from a relationship that starts to feel suffocating. So there are three major hurdles that make life really difficult for avoidance. They keep tripping on them, preventing them from forming better, more secure relationships. One is, I take care of my problems, so should you. The second one is not respecting the attachment homeostasis. And the third one is closeness overdose. The first one, avoidants are really good in taking care of their own problems. If they're sick, they'll take care of themselves. If they have any problems, they don't really usually turn to anyone. But what they don't realize is that they're in the minority. They're 25% of the population. So when someone comes to an avoidant and asks them for help, they're like, wait a second, why are you coming to me? What are you coming to me for? You have to understand that most of the population doesn't have the same response as you do. And just understanding that can help them be there a little bit more for the other person and avoid a major blowout in a relationship. Number two is not respecting the attachment homeostasis. A lot of it is unconscious. So without even thinking about it, like let's say you have a great, a very intense romantic weekend getaway, and then you get back to work and you forget to text your partner. So for you, it's more like, yeah, we spent all this amazing time together. That should be enough. You think you can carry it forward to like relationship credit, but from an attachment logic, that doesn't happen. So for someone who's avoidant, it's like, whoa, what's happening here? This person, I gave them so much, and now they want more. They're so needy. So it really reassures their world belief. People will be needy. People can never get enough. I can never be enough for other people. While all they needed is to learn to respect the attachment homeostasis and send a simple text in the morning like they usually do to keep that attachment quiet. And the third one is what I like to call the closeness overdose. And that often happens when people that are avoidant, they really want to be in a relationship with someone. They really like someone, but they believe that the reason they can't really form closeness with people is because they haven't found the right person yet. So when they find someone that they really like, they swoop all in. And then once they get really close, they get that closeness overdose and they don't feel well. So they start to have these deactivating strategies. They start to think in their mind, oh, I don't know if I like this person so much. I don't know. I don't like the way they eat. They kind of they make a weird noise when they breathe. All sorts of things that they find little faults in them when all they really needed is to pace the closeness more so they feel comfortable easing into the relationship instead of really piling on a lot of closeness. Because the problem is the closeness. It's not that they like or don't like the person enough. They just need to ease into closeness more slowly. They need to pace themselves. So if you're an avoidant person, the simplest way to actually get the space that you need is to employ CARP in all of your behaviors. So by just being a little bit available and making sure to respect that attachment homeostasis, then people are not going to think about a relationship. Because you remember the whole idea about attachment is that you barely think about a relationship in secure relationship. You think about your job, and you can have hobbies, have friends, because secure relationships are enriched environments for the brain. So the next clip that you're going to see also has in it one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about relationships and dating that attachment logic and attachment science dispels.
And then I wake up.
As he listened, Tom began to realize that these weren't stories routinely told. These were stories one had to earn. He could feel the wall coming down. He wondered if anyone else had made it this far, which is why the next 6 words changed everything.
I've never told anybody that before.
I guess I'm not just anybody.
What I really love about this clip is without understanding attachment styles and attachment science, you think, wow, this is a great thing that's happening here. She's opening up to him. She's finally able to share things she's never been able to share with anyone else. This is someone who's really special for her. But from an attachment perspective, it's actually a red flag. You see someone who's avoidant, who has a hard time actually opening up. And you also see this foreboding, wow, she's getting really close to him. And that's something that she's not going to feel comfortable with. So perhaps this relationship, its days are numbered. You're creating this closeness overdose, and this other person may flee after this. I like to equate the fearful avoidant like walking on a tightrope. On the one side, you have to protect yourself from your avoidance tendencies, and then on the other side, you have to protect yourself from your anxious tendencies. And finding that balance, that very careful balance that will give you greater security. So if thinking about the advantages and struggles of people with fearful avoidant attachment, they also have that hyperperception that anxious people have, and they also have that ability to go it alone when they need to. The thing that really distinguishes them from the regular avoidant is that they do have a deep-seated need for intimacy and closeness. They do crave a lot of closeness. It's just that they're really afraid of getting hurt in relationships, and sometimes they just rather give up on having a relationship altogether because it just seems too daunting and too dangerous. And they're like, no, I've been there, I've done that. Thank you, but no thanks. And the work is to help them ease their way into closeness despite of that fear. The same tools that we gave for avoidance and anxious also apply here, but they have to learn how to navigate, sort of juggle between the two worlds. So they do have this tendency to disrupt the attachment homeostasis, and then people lash out at them, and then they get hurt, and immediately, oh my God, relationships are not safe. They also have to learn not to pull away abruptly and to make people upset with them. So they have to learn all of these tools that avoidance have to learn, but they also have to really, and that's such an important thing, to make sure that they really create a very secure world for themselves by making sure that they're CARP with other people, but also that other people are CARP with them. So when they do that, they create this enriched social environment that allows their brain to heal and to get the courage to step into all those relationships and show up for themselves. I have one specific tool that I found is particular. It's helpful for all attachment styles, but it's especially important for people with fearful avoidant attachment style. And I call that tool stopping yourself in your tracks and apologizing. What often happens for people who have fearful avoidant attachment style is that they have a lot of negative emotions in relationships, and they can be easily triggered and easily get upset. And there could be a lot of fights and arguments. But one tool that I found to be particularly helpful is actually when they start going down that route of a fight or an argument, to stop themselves in their track and apologize as it's happening. So for example, let's say I start to get really upset with you and start yelling at you, and then I can, in my mind, say to myself, wait a second, Amir, you don't want to do this. You want to become more secure. And then I say, I'm sorry that I'm yelling at you. I don't want to be this way. I don't want to say things that I know I'll regret later. Can you please help me? And can we find a way to stop this so our relationship doesn't get derailed? It's a new way of connecting with someone in a more secure stance. So now I want to talk about secure attachment. And I have to say, before writing attached and writing secure, I never really noticed so much the secures in my life because they're boring, there's no drama, because they're just so good in relationships. I think it's like their superpower. But at the same time, it does come with disadvantages. Because you remember we talked about the attachment neurocircuitry as a radar, and it's just that their radar is not that sensitive. So they don't pick up on a lot of like the dangerous cues in the environment. So let's say they're probably going to be the last person to know if someone cheated on them because they just like don't really notice the cues. But having said that, it's still such an asset to have that ability to keep your calm. Even when you get upset, they don't really stay upset that long. But it's also important to remember that secures are not angels. They're still going to fight with you. They're still going to get upset. But it's just like things don't seem to linger that much. They're really good at repairing the situation and bringing all that tension down and being able to just move on and enjoy your life. So the other thing that I find about people with secure attachment is that they're like naturals at employing carp semis. They just know exactly like when to text you. They don't get upset if you text them too much. None of that happens. They just like go with the flow. And that makes everything run much more smoothly. Now I want to show you another clip. And again, there's an attachment interaction there. And I wonder if you'll be able to figure out what are the different attachment styles that are involved here.
Gak, party of four?
Party of four? Who are we meeting?
Mom, Dad. This is Elaine.
Hello. Oh. What the hell was that?
What?
Why did you introduce me to your parents?
They're nice people. I thought you'd like them.
Come on, Todd. Admit it. This is a date.
Why is this a date?
Saturday night with your parents? I mean, unless I'm your sister, this is a date.
Elaine, I don't understand why you can't meet someone else's parents without classifying it as a date.
Well, if it's not a date, then what is it?
It's a lovely evening together.
I don't believe this.
I'm gonna get a cab. You want to join me?
It's okay. I'll just walk home.
All right. No. Night.
Now what is that?
I love this clip so much because it really shows how different it can be when different attachment styles interact. The guy is clearly avoidant because he's creating a lot of ambiguity, and people with avoidant attachment styles, they live for that ambiguity because they're so afraid of committing. So he created a situation where she's meeting his parents on Saturday night, and she, being more secure, calls him on it. And basically is like doing a carp intervention. It's like, I'm sorry, this is Saturday night. I'm going on a date with your parents. This is a date. But I really love the ending also because she's not upset. She's smiling and just went home and didn't make a big fuss. So that's really such a good example of what secure attachment is about. I also love this clip because it really speaks to one of the biggest misconceptions in dating, that you shouldn't rock the boat early on in a relationship, that you should let the other person reveal what their intentions are. And from actually learning how secure people date, it's exactly the way that Elaine did it. They wear their heart on their sleeve, they lay it out there early on, and the truth is, that's a really good way of finding a secure partner. Now that you've learned what each attachment style is, it's time to put everything we've learned into action. We'll walk through real relationship moments, early dates, turning points, and long-term dynamics. And I want to see if you can spot attachment patterns and correctly apply carp interventions to these scenarios to make them more secure. I want to tell you a story about Maya and Ethan. They met at a party and immediately they felt a connection. There's definitely an undeniable spark between them. They talk and flirt, and it all feels so effortless and easy. A few days later, they go on a date. It goes well, drinks turn into dinner, dinner turns into a long walk, and at the end of the date, they kiss, and to Maya, it feels really magical. Before saying goodbye, Maya asks Ethan if he'd like to go on a second date. Ethan says, yes, I'll text you and we'll make a plan. But a few days go by and Maya doesn't hear anything back. Maya plays it cool and waits for Ethan to reach out. She doesn't want to seem too eager, but inside she's anything but cool. She's constantly checking her phone, replaying the date in her mind, feeling knots in her stomach, thinking, why isn't Ethan texting? Ethan, on the other hand, is a little more aloof. He likes Maya, he'd see her again, but he's in the middle of preparing for a big presentation at work. And dating isn't his top priority this week. What should Maya do? First, let's pause and assess the situation. If you're watching this and thinking that Ethan is avoidant, I would personally say that I don't have enough information to know what's going on, because who knows why he's not responding. And it most probably has nothing to do with Maya, because it was clear that he was interested in her. So for Maya, after having this physical contact that felt really good, not knowing what's going to happen next is very difficult. And because she most likely does have an anxious attachment style, it puts her in a place where she becomes more preoccupied with the relationship, self-scrutinizing, thinking maybe she did something wrong, not knowing what to do next, waiting for him to reach out. Note, because for someone with an anxious attachment style, what she's doing is actually potentially attracting someone who's more avoidant. Because if you're playing hard to get, or if you're letting them lead the pace of the relationship, you're not really expressing your needs early on in the relationship. And you should, because you really want to test the water to see, does this person has what it takes to meet the needs of someone with an anxious attachment style. But I have to say that it's also part of like these cultural norms that tell women not to reach out to men, to play hard to get. You have to let the other person take the initiative. Maya might be listening to these cultural norms, and the way to go against those potentially harmful beliefs, especially if you have an anxious attachment style, is to do a CARP intervention when you're dating as earliest as possible. If I were Maya, I would put right on my dating app how important CARP is for me. I would put on my profile that I really appreciate when people are consistent, available, and responsive. Like really lay it out there before you even meet the person. And then when you meet them, I would reinforce it on the first date. I would find many different ways to do it. I would even rehearse it at home so I wouldn't feel uncomfortable saying that, because it goes against every dating advice that people usually give. And I would just give that CARP intervention front of center and see what he does. And if he's not attentive to me and he's not really going to respond to what I need, then I would move on and look for someone who does. And this is what I call a secure spiel. You communicate your needs early rather than waiting until it's too late. So in fact, that's what CARP interventions are about. They give you a chance to assess your compatibility with someone, and they attract more people who will meet your needs. So let's say if you're avoidant, you have to adopt a different secure spiel. You can say, I like being in relationships, and especially I'm interested in you, but I know myself, and I know that I don't respond well when there's too much closeness. I feel suffocated. So maybe we can find a way to work it out where I can pace myself, but we can do it together so you can feel good about it too. And when it comes to Ethan, we don't know if he's avoidant or not. But I would say to Ethan, forget about playing hard to get. And also, I know that you potentially don't feel comfortable with too much closeness early on, but it'll be very helpful if you'll be consistent, available, and responsive. And usually what it looks like in the beginning of dating is making sure that you communicate with the person to set the next time you're going to meet and make plans. You don't need to offer more emotion. Just be CARP. Giving that feeling of continuity and availability helps keep the attachment system at bay. This is how you prime people for security early on in dating, by creating conditions where both nervous systems can relax. So it's really learning how to manage the situation in a way, again, that works effectively in the relationship. What I would want people to learn from Maya and Ethan, because it's such a common scenario in early dating, is that you can date differently. You can and should date securely. And the more people do it, the more of a game changer it will be. Let me tell you a story about Jonah and Alex. They've been together for about 6 months, and Jonah is really in love with Alex. He's definitely fully in. But Alex, it's not very clear. Sometimes he's close, sometimes he's not as close, and he's definitely not big on self-disclosure. In fact, Jonah finds that in order to find out about Alex's life and what's going on with him, he has to eavesdrop on Alex's conversations with his friends. To create more closeness between them, Jonah comes up with this idea about going on a vacation together to Amsterdam. Jonah has it in his mind that they'll bring them together, but Alex already is feeling uneasy about spending so much time with him. It just feels like too much for him. But Alex agrees to go anyway. Once they get to Amsterdam, the hotel room that they get is made up of 2 twin beds that are separated. Jonah says, let's put them together so we can sleep next to each other. But Alex says, no, it's too much of a bother. Let's just keep it the way it is. That really upsets Jonah. The next day, they sit at the cafe and Jonah has 2 cookies. But then when they go out and start walking around, he starts feeling really unwell and he realizes that he had pot cookies and not regular cookies. He gets really dizzy, so he sits down on the sidewalk feeling horrible. To his surprise, instead of coming to his aid, Alex snaps at him and says, there's just no end to your neediness. Now, on top of everything else, I need to take care of you too. The whole trip falls apart. They go their separate ways, touring the city on their own. On the plane ride home, they barely exchange a word. And Jonah is sure that their relationship is over. But then, 2 weeks later, Alex shows up, begging for forgiveness and saying that he loves him and that he wants to be together. So what do you think is happening with Alex and Jonah? What should Jonah do? And why is Alex all of a sudden showing up, professing his love? So in the case of Alex and Jonah, not knowing about attachment styles and attachment theory led them to do all the mistakes possible. It's very clear from the description that Alex has an avoidant attachment style. Now, Jonah wanted to create greater closeness between them, falls into the trap of thinking that if he does that whole thing about the closeness overdose, then they're going to sort of maybe like punch through this resistance and become close. But that actually backfired in a huge way. And not only did it not sort of like punch through the closeness, it kind of like punched through their relationship and destroyed it. Alex felt really suffocated in that week-long getaway. I mean, if they only pace themselves, so why do you have to go for a whole week to another country? Why not just try taking a day trip before you commit for a whole week? And then the other thing that we notice from the end of the story is that how when that threat of closeness dissipates 2 weeks after they got back from their trip, how all of a sudden all the feelings that Alex had resurfaced in him because he does love Jonah. And if they were able to pace things more, he might have been able to slowly ease into that relationship. So Alex's behavior on the trip is a classic avoidant behavior. He doesn't like taking care of people who are sick. He expects them to take care of themselves because he takes care of himself. And the fact that he wants to keep the beds apart, it's a classic deactivating strategy. So it's like minimizing some of the closeness. So he's just sending signals, hey, this is a lot for me. It's hard for me to manage that. But the problem for Jonah, not knowing about attachment styles, that he takes it personally. What goes on in Jonah's mind is what often happens to people with anxious attachment style. They personalize everything, thinking I'm not good enough, they don't love me enough, they don't want me, what am I doing wrong? I wish I hadn't had those cookies. How stupid am I? Really taking a lot of self-blame because you just want that closeness and you can't get it and you can't wrap your head around why doesn't he want to be close to me? So if Alex and Jonah were in treatment with me, I would definitely teach them each about their attachment styles and how their worldviews are very different from one another. And I would explain each and every one's needs. I would have explained Jonah's need for carp simis and how easy it is for Alex to actually give him those needs and how by doing that, he would get the space that he needs. And at the same time, I will explain to Jonah Alex's needs for distance and how they need to learn to pace things in terms of closeness, and that he shouldn't really personalize that need for distance and see it as a sign of lack of love or lack of interest. Also, I would tell them that there are different ways they can make this relationship work. For example, they can minimize intimate dinner dates because for people who are avoidant, that's really hard. It's a lot to take in, sitting and watching each other and being that close. And sometimes it's much easier to go on a hike together or to exercise together. There's actually research that shows that physical activities help avoidants feel closer to people without that extra scrutiny of like, now we have to sit facing each other and be super close. So really find creative ways of creating closeness that will bring them together in a way that feels comfortable. Now let's talk about Mark and Lena. Mark and Lena have been married for almost 11 years. They have 2 young kids and 2 full-time jobs. On the whole, they're a good team and things work really well in their relationship. One day, while at the playground with her kids, Lena talks to her friend who tells her that she and her husband, once a month, make it a point to go on a weekend getaway without the kids to keep the spark going between them, winking at her. Late that night, Lena talks to her husband and asks him if he feels that something is wrong in their relationship. Does he feel that the spark is gone? Lena suggests maybe they need to go on a weekend getaway. Mark is surprised. He says, no, I love you. I don't think there's anything wrong in our relationship. Lena keeps insisting. She feels that they need to take a weekend getaway to spruce things up between them. They book a cruise and they leave their kids with a sitter for the first time ever. But things don't go as smoothly as they expected. When they arrive, they find that they're having a hard time really enjoying themselves. They keep thinking about their kids, they call frequently, they really miss them. Instead of feeling the spark, what they end up feeling is a lot of stress of being away from the kids and worrying about them. Back home, they admit to each other that their trip was more stressful than fun, and they were happy to be with their kids and their routine. It became a running joke between them about the spark trip that proved how happy they already were. So from an attachment perspective, what happened between Mark and Lena? And what do you think about what her friend told her about keeping the spark going? What I really love about Mark and Lena's story is about how secure love is oftentimes taken for granted, and how you can also be insecurely primed by people from outside to make you think that something is wrong in your relationship, where in fact everything is actually going very smoothly and quite well. So I think it's such a good example of Lena going to the park, Lena hearing, oh my God, you have to do this, and then thinking, oh my God, what's wrong in our relationship? We have to fix it. Something is wrong. So I find that in our culture, there's some myths and misunderstanding about what good relationships are, because with secure relationships, there's not necessarily a lot of drama or a lot of excitement. And many people confuse this calmness and stability with the loss of love. Secure relationships are there to help you actually put the relationship in the background so you can actually move on with your life and explore and create and work and raise kids. That's the basic function of that secure unit. It's not that super exciting bells and whistles all the time. In fact, I think in Attached, we wrote this line that says that still water runs deep is a really good way of describing secure love. But security doesn't maintain itself. It still needs nourishment. Even though the secure semis are a baseline for secure love, you can also create this enhanced secure semis program. And I call that the Couples Miles program, where each partner is trying to outdo the other, which really means finding ways to always be there for the other person and do things for the other person, whether it means physical touch or putting the dishes away, walking the dog. Every time that you're doing something like that, you accumulate miles in your miles program. And the other thing that actually really helps gain more miles in the program is something simple as saying thank you. I love saying thank you, and I think that it's so helpful to even say, well, thank you for making the bed. Thank you for taking the dog out. And even thanking people for the most mundane things. It seems like, oh my God, they're saying thank you all the time. I think it really enhances the sense of security in a relationship. And in terms of Mark and Lena, I love that story because really understanding, well, actually, we've been having it really good for all this time. The secure love is what enables us to really carry it all forward. The one hope I have for people taking this class is that you really learn the language of attachment. You learn your attachment style and those of others, and then learn how to incorporate the CARP CMEs into your life so you can pave a more secure world for yourself and for the people around you. It will profoundly change your brain for the better and allow the brain to put its guard down and be able to give more energy into more creative, worthwhile endeavors rather than constantly obsessing about those insecure relationships that you left behind. One of the most gratifying things in secure therapy is to see how people evolve and become more secure. And oftentimes in the beginning, they feel uncomfortable because it's like going into a strange land. It's like, what is this? I'm not used to people always responding to me. Like, is this real? Is this safe? It feels uncomfortable and unfamiliar. And I try to tell patients, hang in there. This is for the best. Don't be afraid of this completely new terrain that you're not familiar with. Once you get used to it, you'll never look back.